So because there are a lot of features to cover when it comes to dimensions and automatic dimensions specifically, this is going to be a pretty quick and dirty intro to those tools. We also have some new functionality in X13 that I want to try to get to as well. So let's look quickly at the automatic behavior you see when you start Chief for the first time and you start drawing your plans. Once you've got your walls on screen, you'll probably notice that you get these automatic exterior dimensions around your design. So I obviously have a lot here because I've already put my interior walls and my windows and doors in, and the automatic dimension is currently set up to grab all of those. The thing that I like about this tool is it allows me to select things like my walls and my windows and my doors, and I can just kind of be like in the design mindset, and those dimensions will update automatically and give me some spatial awareness as far as of how things are kind of coming together. If you don't like that behavior, you can shut it off. I'll show you how to do that, but there's a couple other things that I want to point out before I do. You can notice that this deck, we have this deck back here, and we also have a porch here, and these are built out of railings, and the automatic exterior dimension tool is currently not picking those up. That's simply a control within the object. So within the wall itself, this railing wall, I have this option for no locate, and that's just telling the program that anytime you draw a new dimension string on your screen or an automatic dimension, don't locate this particular wall. So if I turn this off, you can see that my dimensions update and it catches this wall now. If I'm doing deck design specifically, you might set up your template so that deck railings are always set to no locate, so you never have to chase that dragon around. The other thing that I want to point out is I have these windows here, so you can see that I have 3 windows in a few places. They're just groupings of windows and they're literally blocked together. So even though initially I placed those as 1, 2, 3 windows, I didn't want 3 dimensions to show my opening because maybe I care more about the header size and that overall span. The way that you can get the automatic dimensions to respect those is by creating a mold unit, and to do that you simply block them together. So right now you can see when I select this window, it's blocked. If I explode it, you can see the dimensions update to each individual unit. You just group select them. I'm holding shift, group selecting, then I have this little block tool in my edit toolbar. Other things like where those dimensions snap. So maybe, for example, I only want to snap my automatic dimensions to the framed opening or to the center of my openings. Those are controlled in your dimension defaults for the auto exterior dimension. So in my default settings dialog under dimensions, we have this auto exterior dimension area. And in this dialog, you have a few controls here. So you can do things like turn off the overall dimension, which is this long dimension on the whole thing. You can tell it to ignore your interior walls. So if you only want to show the footprint or the shell of the house for like a brochure, that's a useful feature. And then this is how you can control whether or not those refresh. So you can turn that on or off. And then on this locate objects panel, you can control how these automatic dimensions snap to your walls. So right now I have them snapping to the dimension layer of my walls, which happens to be the framing layer or the main layer. You can set this to dimension only to the surfaces, so that would be outside to the edge of the siding. Or if you're telling the program to hit both of the wall sides for your interior walls, then it would hit the siding and the drywall surfaces for every wall in your design. So depending on what type of project you're doing, that might be useful. And then here you control where on each opening that automatic dimension snaps to. So right now I have it snapping to the sides of the unit itself. So that's a good way, these controls, if you set those up in your templates to the way that you would typically want to print your dimensions, then you kind of are falling into that 80-20 rule where you're getting on screen 80% of the dimensions that you need, and then you can come through and you can edit all of these so that they're more finalized. The other thing I want to point out is any of these dimensions, the first time that they're generated, because they're using the auto dimension tool, in order to create them, they're also going onto a specific layer. So the layer is Dimensions Automatic. So it's good to understand where these live the first time they're created, because often I'll use my automatic dimensions to get a dimensions for my floor plan, and then I'll want to do another set later on to dimension the start for my framing plans, for example. So what I'll do is I'll generate my dimensions the first time, and then you can select any of these dimensions and open up the specification for them, and you can see the specific attributes it's using beyond those initialized settings. So these are using the 1/4 inch scale dimension default, and that controls the size of the text in the arrow and the offset from the wall and the text size that you see on the screen. Right now, this particular dimension is still on Dimensions Automatic, and I may want to add more dimensions later. So I tend to, once I get these set up the first time, I tend to check what layer they're on, and then I'll go through. It's asking me, do I want to turn off my refresh option? And I do, because we're going to start editing these. So I do want to put these on a different layer so I know I have control over them, separate from any future automatic dimensions that I put on my screen. So the way that I do that is I'll select my dimension tool on my screen here. And if I hold my shift key down on my keyboard and then left click and drag a marquee around everything on this plan view, because I was in this dimension mode before I made the selection, the program knows that I want to only select dimension objects. So now that those are all selected, I can open them as a group, and I can come to this layer attribute and I can change this. So now I can put these on their own custom layer, and I'm just going to make a new layer just for this floor plan dimension. So I've made a copy, and I'm just going to type floor plan in here. So now I can control that this specific group of dimensions that I've created, they're no longer considered automatic by the program, and they no longer live on this automatic layer. So I have full control over what pages I want those to display on. So now something I can do is switch modes. I can go over to my floor plan framing layer, my save plan view, and I can do something similar again. So I can set up my defaults for my auto dimensions, and this time I want them to go to the interior wall centers, because maybe that's what my framer prefers, and instead of to the sides of the opening, I'll go to the rough opening. And if I hit OK and done, this time when I click the Auto Exterior Dimension tool, it's going to ask me, do I want to turn this layer on? And I will, just temporarily. So let's hit yes. The program's snapping those dimension strings to the center of the wall and to the rough openings. So this gives me a good head start on my framing plan, and I can come back through and clean this up as necessary. So the one thing I want to do here when I'm trying to use my auto exterior dimensions for multiple views is to make sure I change that layer, because that's going to enforce the difference between an automatic dimension and a manual dimension, and it will make sure that I just don't accidentally have this layer turned on for multiple views if they're indicating different things. So again, I'll use my shift select while I'm in the dimension mode to open all of those guys, and I'm going to just change the layer for all of those dimensions I've selected to my framing floor plan. Okay? So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of the auto exterior dimension tool. Let's look at a few other options we have for automatic dimensioning. We have this tool when you select on a room for automatic interior dimensioning. A few versions ago, that tool used to be from the automatic dimension drop-down list, but we've since moved it to a per room basis. So whenever you select a room, like I have here, and look down at my edit toolbar on the bottom, I have these two dimension options. The first one is my automatic interior dimension tool. So when I click on this button, it's again going to ask me, do I want to turn this layer on? And I'll choose yes. You can see the program has supplied a bunch of dimensions inside of this room. So this can look a little bit messy, and again, you can come into your defaults and simplify the locate parameters. So let's say, for example, I only care about the walls and where the walls are located when I do my interior dimensions. So I'll choose those attributes, and then let's automatic dimension this room, and you can see it cleans it up. So you can set up your templates to use different settings for those defaults as well. The other tool that we saw down on the bottom of that screen was the auto NKBA dimension. So let's go over a couple of the options that are available for that. I'll switch over to my kitchen and bath plan view. And the first thing you'll notice is I have these bathroom areas in the kitchen. They're kind of covered with lots of dimensions. So what's happening is just like the auto refresh for the exterior dimension, there is an option to turn on auto refresh for these NKBA auto dimensions. So again, you can set this up in your template. I have these dimensions set to always draw on my kitchen and bath dimension layer. And that way I have them set up to be 1/2 inch scale for when I print. They'll only show up when I'm in my kitchen and bath plan view. So those are things that are set up in the templates, and you can adjust these however you'd like. You'll notice in the NKBA auto dimension defaults that you don't have as many options. The idea is that these are configured to work as closely to the National Kitchen and Bath Association's guidelines as possible, as far as Chief Architect can discern. So the things that you can control are whether it auto refreshes and what layer it's turned on to. So the rest of the locate controls are just hard-coded into the tool itself. The scale and the format and the offset are controlled by your dimension defaults. If we just really briefly look at this, those are your kitchen and bath dimension defaults here, and those can be adjusted in your dimension defaults. Again, this is a scenario where the way it works behind the scenes is the Chief Architect looks for rooms that are defined as kitchens or bathrooms, and that's simply using this room type attribute. So here, so if this is from this drop down, it's set to a kitchen type or a bathroom type or any room that's derived off of those room types, the automatic refresh will work and put dimensions on the screen. I can select any room, and even if it's not a kitchen or a bathroom, I can use this NKBA auto dimension tool, and it will still put those type of dimensions on screen. So it's not a hard fast rule that it's a kitchen and bathroom. It's just when you're using the auto refresh tools, the program is looking for kitchen rooms and bathrooms. Okay, so now we have 2 more automatic dimension tools that I want to show you. The first one, again, is another NKBA dimension tool, and it's our NKBA elevation dimensions. So if I choose my wall elevation camera, and I'm just going to click and drag towards the wall that I want to start dimensioning for my kitchen and bath design. Again, I have the option for the NKBA auto elevation dimensions. So when I click on this, I get another set of dimensions that are intended to reflect the NKBA's guidelines. So this is quite similar to the plan view dimensions. You're limited in the locate objects settings. Those are hard-coded for this tool, and the idea is that it's supposed to get you most of the way there in getting the first set of dimensions on screen. We have some other videos that we've done that show how to edit some of these elevation dimensions, so I really recommend looking at those to see some techniques on how to clean these up and make them look pretty sharp for your final designs. So the things to know about this setting are, before you click the button for the NKBA auto elevation dimensions, you should make sure that you're in a default set that is scaled appropriately, or else you'll have this blowout of crazy dimensions all over your screens. I typically check to make sure that I'm in my kitchen and bath saved plan view, or that my kitchen and bath defaults are the active active defaults. Those are set to be a 1/2 inch scale and that sort of thing. So the last major automatic dimension tool that I want to show you is the Storypole dimension, and you can get to that after you create an elevation view. When I click on this button, it gives us a different look of a dimension. It's kind of your story pole that shows the important structural components of your design. So again, this is editable through your dimension defaults. And you'll look at the locate elevations area of this dialog in order to control what's being displayed here. These are the options that you can include in the list, and you can choose to add. For example, if we want to show the header, we'll just choose add here. And you can also rename these pieces to control what is displayed with the marker. So we'll go ahead and refresh this, and you can see that header dimension is included. Again, it's the same story. Once you get your initial automatic dimensions on screen, you can go ahead and adjust these, so you can pull dimensions off just like you can with any type of a dimension tool in Chief Architect, and clean this up as necessary. So that's a fast and easy way to get a story pole on your screen. So we've talked about the automatic tools that are currently available in X12. Let's look at the enhancements we've added for X13. One of my favorite features that I'm actually really excited about is the ability to have multiple automatic exterior dimensions. And what I mean by that is simply that setup that we went through at the beginning of this demonstration can be saved in your template and made unique for every plan view that you create. So for your brochure plans, for your floor plans, your framing plans, your electrical plans, those can all have their own exterior dimension that refreshes as your design changes. So let's look at this example. I have my floor plan view shell. This is just my simple drawing that shows essentially the dimensions to the footprint of my design. And I have it currently using an automatic exterior dimension that can refresh. So if I drag this wall, my dimensions will update. If I switch views, so I'll switch over to my dimensioned plan view that includes more settings like my windows, these also update. If I look at the defaults, you can see that our dimension options have been consolidated. Some of those settings that we were changing in X12 are now contained within the general dimension defaults. Because all of your tools listed in your toolbar are now following these defaults, you get some benefits, like, for example, all of your dimensions land on the same layer. So remember how we were group selecting all of those automatic dimensions and making sure they land on the right layer? Now that you have automatic dimensions as part of your dimension defaults, they just live with the rest of the family. So they all can work together. And when you're thinking about your kitchen design, you're doing kitchen design dimensioning and electrical dimensioning and framing dimensioning. They live with the plan view that you've set up. All of those automatic defaults that were listed at the higher level are now part of the family of the dimension defaults. You have locate settings that control what the dimension will be snapping to when you create your auto dimensions. And you have a set of those available for each of the tool types that you might be using from your toolbar. We also added a setting in X13 for your centerline dimension. So anytime you've snapped to the center of an object, you can automatically tell the program to add the centerline character to the dimension string. In X12, this behavior was only available if you were drawing a dimension using the centerline dimension tool. So now no matter what type of tool you're using, when you hit that middle of the object, we'll put the centerline marker. Another new feature is in the primary format panel. You have this option to display as inches. So when you normally show feet in inches, if your dimension value is less than this threshold, then we'll show that unit in inches only. So let's say, for example, we change this value to 24. Anytime you have a dimension string that reads as 24 2 feet or less, you can see this is updated to a 24-inch indicator instead of a 2-foot indicator. We've added the ability to snap to other dimension lines. A good example of this is if you're editing an existing dimension, you can now snap to the string so that you know they're perfectly aligned. You can also rotate your dimension text. So if I zoom in here, you can see I have this rotate handle on the dimension number. So I can manually rotate that. I can also control the rotation of text within my dimension default in the primary format panel. So here you can see I have this option for angle. If I turn off automatic and hit OK, my dimension text will always be on the 0-degree angle. We've mentioned a couple other of the new dimensioning features in X13, like the ability to dimension to your cabinet faces and dimension to your foundation steps and elevation views. You can watch some of our previous webinars to see how those new tools work as well. I think that kind of covers what I wanted to talk about as far as the new automatic dimension tools are concerned for X13 and how they work in general in Chief Architect.